Okay, today we are doing your 11F notes. For your 11F notes, we are factoring trinomials. So I think we're all good with vocabulary by now. Trinomial means you have three terms. So if you look at number 1, we've got x squared, your negative 10x, and a positive 25. Three terms, trinomial. Whenever you're going to factor a trinomial, your first step is to throw down some parentheses. You're going to ask yourself, how do we get an x squared? Well, by multiplying x times x. And then this is the way I teach it. I don't know how other people teach it, but I call this the add and multiply game. You want to find two numbers. They're going to add to give you the middle number, negative 10, and they're going to multiply to give you a positive 25. I would start by listing your factors of 25. In order to multiply to give you 25, it's either 1 and 25 or 5 and 5. Which combination of this, 1 and 25 or 5 and 5, could you get a negative 10 out of? Hopefully, you realize that 5 and 5. If you're going to get a positive 25, they have to have the same sign. And if they're going to add to give you negative 10, they're both going to be negative. You could call it done there, or if you want to be fancy, you can write it as x minus 5 quantity squared, since it's multiplied by itself. Okay, number 2, always check to make sure it's in standard form. X squared, x, constant, we're good. Throw down your parentheses. X times x will give me x squared. And again, you're going to do a little add and multiply game. The factors that give you negative 12, it could be 1 and 12, 2 and 6, or 3 and 4. You want one of these sets of numbers to also add to give you negative 4. 1 and 12 are not going to give you a negative 4. 2 and 6 could. So that's your winner. 3 and 4, if you add those, you're also not. But you've got to be careful here, because in order to get a negative 4, it would have to be a negative 6 and a positive 2. You should also recognize that your signs are different inside the parentheses. One's a negative, one's a positive, so that you get the negative 12 when you multiply them. And you are done. What we're doing is we are basically unfoiling. So you can always check yourself. If you were to multiply this out, FOIL it, you would get x squared plus 2x minus 6x minus 12. You could combine these two, and look, it's right back where we started. So this is how you're going to check your answer to make sure it's right. But this right here, x minus 6, x plus 2, that's your final answer. All right, number 3. Number 3 is quite nice because they're both plus signs. If you've got two plus signs, you can throw two plus signs down in your parentheses. So x times x will give us x squared. You need to come up with factors of 12. So 1 times 12, 2 times 6, or again 3 and 4. You want those also to add to give you 8. So out of these options, 2 and 6 will give you 8. So your answer is x plus 2 and x plus 6. Number 4. Number 4 is not a trinomial. So you have options here. The easiest way is to recognize that this is what we did in 11D. Difference of squares. You are subtracting, that's your difference part, perfect squares. So again, 2 parentheses, x times x will give you x squared, and the square root of 100 is 10. If you're going to get a negative, you have to have one negative, one positive. When you go to FOIL this, so that's your final answer. But again, if you wanted to check it, you could FOIL it. And what happens, remember, you've got x squared plus 10x minus 10x minus 100. Those cancel out. So you're left with x squared and minus 100. Remember, you need the opposite signs up here. One's negative, one's positive, so that when you do multiply them, you get a negative 100. Number 5 is going to be super similar to 1, 2, and 3. You can put an A for add above the number 7, and put an M for multiply above the 10. Throw down some parentheses. X times x will give you x squared. And then you've got to think of your factors of 10. So 1 times 10, 2 times 5. You've only got 2 options to choose from. You want something that's going to add to give you 7. So 2 and 5 is your winner. So x plus 2 and x plus 5. You could FOIL it out and you will get that. So you are right. And that's pretty much it for today. So we're going to work on the rest. You should probably definitely check these. You can kind of pause this from here and go ahead and work on your own for 6 through 10. Number 11 through 16 is a little more complicated, so make sure you check back for that. But I will go over these if you don't want to pause it. Okay, for number 6, you have a trinomial, x squared, x constant. You want to find 2 numbers that add to give you negative 11 and multiply to give you positive 24. You can think about the signs beforehand if you want. If you're going to multiply to get a positive, they have to have the same sign. If you're going to add to get a negative, that same sign is going to have to be negatives. Your factors of 24, there's a whole list of them. We've got 1 and 24, 2 and 12, 3 and 8, 4 and 6. And then you could keep going backwards. But if you make them negative, so negative 1, negative 24, negative 2, negative 12, the ones that will add to give you negative 11 are the 3 and the 8. There we go. Number 7 is another one that's really nice because it's 2 positives. X times x gives you x squared. What adds to give you 4 and multiplies to give you 4? 2 and 2. Your only other option will be 1 and 4, but that's not true. So x plus 2 times x plus 2. And then just like number 1 up here, since it's the same exact thing, you could feel fancy and write it as that. Number 8, not a trinomial. Nope, there's no x middle term. So again, hopefully you realize we're doing difference of squares. And square root of x squared is x. Square root of 4 is 2. If you're going to multiply and get a negative 4 and have that middle term disappear, one's positive, one's negative. Number 9, again, super nice because you have 2 plus signs. So everything involved in the problem is positive. So your answers are all positive as well. So you can throw those plus signs down. Factors of 6 are 1 and 6, or 2 times 3. Again, they're both the same sign in order to get a positive when you multiply. If you're going to add to get positive 5, it's going to have to be 2 and 3. If you FOIL that, you will get that for your final answer. And number 10, what adds to give you negative 2 and multiplies to give you negative 3? Well, 3 is prime, so your only option is 1 and 3. Just be careful here, because if you're going to multiply to get a negative 3, one has to be positive and one has to be negative. If you're going to add to get a negative number, the bigger number is always going to be this sign. So out of these two, 3 is bigger. So it's going to be -3 and +1. That's going to be your final answer. If you were to switch this around, that is no good. If you FOIL that, you get x squared plus 3x minus 1x minus 3. That'll give you x squared plus 2x minus 3. And we want a -2. So that doesn't work. If you FOIL this one, it will indeed work. All right, we're just going to zoom on to number 11 through 16. 11 through 16, it doesn't say so, but the directions may say something like factor completely. And we talked yesterday, when it says completely, that's kind of a hint that this is more than one step. So when you look at number 11, you should realize you've got a -x squared. I don't wish anyone to try to factor with a negative beginning. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to divide everything out by -1. And we mentioned before, if you've got a negative out front, you've got to take out a negative. So I'm going to divide all these by -1, and that leaves me with x squared plus 2x minus 8. Remember, if you divide by a negative, that just changes all the signs in a polynomial. All right, and now from here, this is just your add and multiply game. What two numbers add to give you 2 and multiply to give you -8. Make sure you keep this -1 along for the ride the whole time. So you want to multiply to give you -8. So your options are 1 and 8 and 2 and 4. You should realize if you're going to multiply to get a negative here, you're going to have different signs. And in order to get a positive, the bigger number needs to be the positive. 1 and 8 will not give you 2. 2 and 4, you could get a 2 out of that. Like I said, once you pick the numbers, the bigger number is this sign here. So 4 is bigger, so 4 is positive, and 2 is negative. Basically, the math behind that is you need more positives than negatives to end up with a positive. So your bigger number is 4, so you've got more positives than negatives. Please make sure your final answer is all three parts, -1, x plus 4, and x minus 2. Number 12, you should look at this and hopefully you realize that's a lovely bunch of even numbers. Since they're all even, you could divide them all by 2. When you divide it by all of them, that's your GCMF, so that's what you're going to bring out front. So if you take a 2 out, you're left with x squared minus 7x plus 12. And then you could put in your little add to give you -7, multiply to give you 12. If they're going to multiply to give you a positive number, they're going to have the same sign. If they're going to add to give you a negative, they're both going to have to be negative. Factors of 12, we've got 1 times 12, that does not give us 7. 2 times 6, that also does not give us 7. And 3 times 4, there you go. -3 and -4. -3 times -3 is positive 12, or sorry, times -4 is positive 12. -3 plus -4 is -7. Number 13, again, there's a coefficient here. You've got a 2. So the easiest way to do this problem is to take that 2 out. And you're in luck because 4 and 48 are also divisible by 2. So let's just divide everything by 2. And again, since you're dividing by 2, that 2 needs to stay as part of your answer. Because factoring is basically just trying to figure out how many little pieces can you break it up into, and then show me all the little pieces. So you're breaking out the 2. You're left with x squared plus 2x minus 24. This is a trinomial. You've got x squared, x constant, so we can play the add and multiply game. Bring down the 2, throw down your parentheses. If you're going to multiply and get a negative, you're going to have different signs. One's going to be a negative number, one's going to be a positive in order to get that negative. And then your bigger number is going to be this sign, positive. Before we get ahead of ourselves, factors of 24, 1 and 24, 2 and 12, 3 and 8, and 4 and 6. You don't have to list those out if you can do this in your head just fine, and I'm sure a lot of you can. So if you want to get a positive 2, you're going to have to choose this one. And like I said, this sign is the sign of the bigger number. If we're going to end up with a positive number, we're going to have to start with more positives to begin with. So plus 6 minus 4 gives you positive 2. If you add, negative 4 times positive 6 gives you negative 24 if you multiply. Number 14 looks very similar to number 11 because you're starting with a negative. So please divide out a negative 1. Keep him out front. That's just going to change all of your signs. They were all negative. If you divide out a negative 1, they are all positive now. You're going to play your add and multiply game. I'm hoping by now we're getting pretty good at it. If you're going to multiply to give you 12 and add to give you 7, 1 and 12, 2 and 6, 3 and 4, yes, 3 and 4. There you go. Number 15, those are some big numbers, and I'm not really interested in working with big numbers. And that's okay, because all of these numbers, hope you realize, have a 5 in them. So if you divide out the 5 from all of them, that's going to make a lot nicer of a problem here for us to do. So keep the 5 out front. Show me all the pieces we have. So that'll make x squared. 50x divided by 5 is 10x. 125 divided by 5 is 25. You want to find two numbers that add to give you 10 and multiply to give you positive 25. You can throw down some parentheses. X times x will give you x squared. You want numbers that multiply to give you 25. Your only options are 1 times 25 or 5 and 5. If you're going to add to give 10, 5 and 5 are your numbers. A lot of 5s there. And number 16 is the last question. You've got a 3 here, so that complicates things. But fortunately, everything else is also divisible by 3. So divide out the 3. That'll cancel there. Write down the 3 there. X squared, 24x over 3 is 8x. 48 divided by 3 is 16. Keep the 3. Break up your trinomial into two things that you could multiply to get it. We could FOIL them. X times x is x squared. You want to find two numbers that multiply to give you 16 and add to give you 8. So 1 and 16 don't work. 2 and 8 don't work. 4 and 4, that does work. So x plus 4, x plus 4. You could leave it as that, but just like on the first page, you could write it as 3 and then x plus 4 quantity squared. That's it.